And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel. Today we're taking a look at a card game called Imperium Classics. Now realize that there's two Imperium games out there. There's Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends, and this is full of various real-life civilizations, and the other one is like the Atlanteans and the Utopians, kind of mythical things. But the games play with the same rules, sort of. I'll talk about that at the end of this review, and they can be mixed together. This is the one I'm reviewing in particular because this is the one I played. There is a big solo component to this game that I'm not going to be covering. Mike Delicio will be taking a look at that in a separate video. So I'm coming at this from a multiplayer perspective. This is a deck building game. So here we go. Realize that this is a very basic overview. Please don't use it to learn the game, but hopefully I can give you an idea of how the game plays. This game is a deck builder, and at the end of the game, you're going to look at every card in your empire that you've gotten. You're going to get points for progress tokens that you've collected over the game, and then cards are going to give you points. You can see this card here is worth a point. This one's worth 3. This one here is 1 point for every 4 progress tokens that you have. There's a limit to how many points you can get per card, but that's what you're trying to do, get a lot of points. You're going to be doing this by picking one of the factions that's in the box. So you have the Persians and the Carthaginians and the Greeks and the Celts and the Macedonians and the Vikings and the Scythians and then finally the Romans. These cards here, this kind of setup I have here is kind of commons. These are cards that can go in anyone's deck, including unrest cards. And I should mention here that there's an alternate way the game can end. The game is usually going to end at a certain point, and whoever has the most points wins. But unrest cards, if all the unrest cards are gone and in players' decks, the game will immediately end, and whoever has the fewest unrest cards wins the game despite points. But anyway, let's take a look at an empire. So here we have the Romans. You'll be able to pick which side you want. So this has like a special ability, and they score in different ways. So you pick one of those. I said empire, but you start the game as barbarians. Well, most of the factions start as barbarians. And at one point in the game, you're going to turn into an empire. And this is going to determine the cards you can get. You can see these cards are for empires only. And so players are also going to have tokens where they're collecting resources that they're going to spend. You're going to be, you have these tokens here to keep track of the actions on your turn. On a player's turn, you have 3 different things you can do. You can activate, innovate, or revolt. And then you're going to clean up. Revolt is kind of the easiest one to explain. You're going to have a deck of cards. So if I was the Romans, this is my starting deck of cards, and I'm going to be drawing cards and playing through cards, and occasionally you're going to get unrest cards. Revolt lets you get rid of unrest cards. You can take them out of your hand, put them back in the pile, but that's the entirety of your turn. You can't do anything else if you do that, but that is the easiest one to explain. When you activate, you're going to get actions that you're going to spend to play cards. And the different cards, remember I said you can't play a card unless, like for example, these work as long as I'm barbarians. Once I'm barbarians, they no longer work. And once you start collecting cards like this, you can't use them until you're an empire. But when you play a card, it's going to let you do something. And the cards do a lot of different things. Like this says, acquire a card that has this token. I can acquire a token again. Then each other player recalls one of these. Put this card in your history. Your history is basically a place that you can put cards to keep them safe. So this is like a one-time use. But what it's going to let me do is take a land card. Ooh, this one comes with a victory point on it. You put those on cards that no one takes each round. Now this card here, later on, when I get to play it, This is going to stay in front of me. It's going to give me these symbols, which will matter for different things. When I play it, I get a token. I can exile a card from the market, get rid of one of the cards from the market, and garrison a card. Garrisoning a card allows me to put another card underneath it, essentially taking out of my deck temporarily. And there are effects and things that say if you have a card garrisoned, you can do this and that and so on. Now, I mentioned acquiring cards. There's going to be decks here that are very specific types of cards, although there's also going to be this main deck which has a bunch of them thrown in at the beginning. When you acquire a card, let's say I get this ambassador card, this might be a pretty cool card, but it comes with an unrest card. Lots of the cards that you take, usually with the exception of the yellow land cards, are going to come with these unrest cards. Cards that you acquire go into your discard pile. When your deck runs out, you'll shuffle your discard pile into your deck to use these. So you have a lot of different cards. Sometimes they come with tokens on them. They'll give you various things that you can do, and you're acquiring them. You also have a thing that's called breakthrough that you can do, and this is one of the other actions. I said you can activate, revolt, or innovate. In innovate, you basically discard all the cards in your hand, and then you can break through. And when you break through, you can take cards here in the market, but you can also, or take the top card from a market. So sometimes I don't want these face-up cards. I might want the top card of one of these decks. You are trying to get these cards here from this pile because they're worth lots of points in the game, and they're also great cards. Can gain an action. I can put this card in my history, and this is 6 victory points if it's in your history, 2 points otherwise. This lets me steal a point from each other player. Anyone unable to pay takes an unrest card, and this is 1 victory point for every unrest card scored by other players. When you go through this deck, eventually you'll free up the King of Kings card, and this is one of the end game triggers. You'll flip this card, but you can get a lot of points for doing this, and that will help end the game. There's a whole lot of different things, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to acquire cards into your deck. Every time you go through your deck, you're going to be basically clearing out the cards on top of your leader here. Look, Julius Caesar, he will eventually come into my hand. And these cards are specific to the Romans, and they're put there. There's a little symbol there to let you know that. But once you go through all that, then hey, you get to be an empire. And at that point, on different rounds, you're going to be going through this pile and being able to take a card and deliberately add it to your deck. So your deck building is coming from specifically cards that are in your own deck, your own culture, and then these common cards out here. And it's up to you to put together some sort of strategy to win the game. Like I said, the game's going to end when that King of Kings card comes out, or all the unrest cards are over. Some of the cultures have specific ways to trigger the end of the game, or when someone has built all the development cards in their area. You add up points, unless it's a collapse where all the unrest are gone, and whoever has the most points is the winner. There's a lot to talk about with components, but we have to talk about the rule book. Well, there's actually 2 rule books. There's a rule book and a solo rule book. But we're going to talk about the rule book first. These aren't great rules. The rules are written for Imperium, whether you're playing with Classics or with Legends. And you know this because they constantly tell you what to do. There's a lot of things they'll be like, if you're playing Arthurians or Utopians, well, they're not even in this set. So if you are, though, so the game has, the rules have a lot of pages for setup, and then just a couple pages on how to play. How is that possible? That's because after they go over this, there's keywords. You have to read the whole keyword section. This isn't something that you'll look through because, for example, acquire and breakthrough are major sections in the game. So when you're looking for how to play the game, and there's card-specific notes and things, I found myself flipping through this book all the time. And the symbology on the cards I didn't find to be particularly easy. Now, the artwork itself is fine. But this is like acquire this, put this card in your history, and that's worth 3 victory points. Okay, that's pretty easy. Each other player abandons that. So I got to look up what abandons mean. Get 2 per abandon that. Then I can acquire one of these. And so there's just a lot of different things. These symbols at the top will often go off various things. Card can be played in front of you. You have your history of garrisoning a card. And so there's a lot of different confusion that's going to happen there. And this rule book does not really alleviate that. I don't think I did with my overview here. I don't think I made it much clearer, but this rule book was not a big help. The game itself comes with a little plastic insert where you can put all the different cards of the different types in there. And like I said, I like the art. I also found it wasn't too hard to sort cards out because they have, each civilization, there's a corner with a color, so they're all the same color. And then when you sort the common ones out, you're basically just looking at the symbols at the bottom to figure out where they go. So that wasn't too bad. The tokens themselves are, they're fine. It's good quality for the most part. It's just going to be a little overwhelming. Now, I tend to love deck building games. This is easily one of the most complex deck building games out there. Now, likely somebody will come along in the comments here, you'll read somewhere else, that this game really isn't that complex. And sure, when you understand everything that's going on in it, it's not particularly complex. It's just that it has an incredibly high barrier of entry. Very few people are going to just pick this up, set it down, and go, got it. It's a difficult game to grasp. And it wasn't until the very end of my first game where I thought maybe I knew what was going on. And even then I found out I got a rule or two wrong. The bad rule book does not help things. The strong theming does help things to some degree, but it also doesn't help things with the rules. And that's the thing here, folks, with these rules. So when I go through these rules, there is an exception for everybody. Like, I'll sit here and I'll read through this and we'll say, oh, if you're playing as the Vikings or the Arthurians, who are in the other set, who can never flip their state card, you can use your Combs or Guinevere card to play these cards. Okay, and if I do this, if you're playing the Carthaginians, if you're playing the Quinn, if you're playing the Utopians, if you're playing these people, if you're playing these people. So everyone has their own exceptions. Now, here's the good part of that. It's a very steep learning curve. You don't know how to win. It's, okay, avoid unrest cards, get cards with points, but how to get there. There's that steep learning curve, but the fact that every single one of these factions being different, that's amazing. That's really cool. The Romans, the ones I showed you, are one of the more straightforward factions. And in fact, they have them all ranked here. So like the Romans are ranked 1 out of 5 stars. While if you want to play the Greeks, they're 4 out of 5 stars. The Vikings are 3. Most of the ones in this set are 1 or 2. The most difficult ones, the Arthurians and the Utopians, are in the other set. In fact, there's no 1-star set in the Legends box. But in this Classics box, they're much easier. So this is the first one to get. But when you go into this, you need to realize that it is a kind of a slow deck building game. You have a handful of cards. Most of the cards at the beginning are about getting other cards. So which cards do I want? Okay, I'm going to take these. That gives me unrest. I want to get rid of this unrest. I want to play these cards and eventually start adding other cards into my deck. You want to go through your deck as quickly as you can, because the faster you go through your deck, the faster you turn into an empire. And then you start picking cards that are really cool, but you put them in your deck, you're cycling through, trying to get back to these cards. It is a deck builder. There are ways to cull cards from your deck, although there's all kinds of weird terminology for that. There's definitely in-your-face take-that moments. You saw stuff where you're stealing from your opponents. There's a lot of that in this game. But there's also going to be a decent amount of downtime. I think my new rule with this game is I will play it only with 2, because more than that, you're kind of waiting. There's a lot of choices to be made on someone's turn. Not to mention that market's going to get changed quite a bit between turns, so why look at it and prepare ahead of time? Again, there's a solo thing for this, and Mike said it's quite good. I don't know if I want to try that out. I might in the future, but like I said, I'm looking at this from this perspective. So a tricky to teach game with very asymmetrical sides. One of the most asymmetrical games I've ever played. Every faction feels incredibly different from each other. There's a lot going on. It's a bit of a bear to set up and take down. There's just pieces all over the place doing this, going here, setting up each faction. It's actually easier to take down, I think, than to set up, just because you just quick sort out the cards and put them away. So there's all that going on. And despite all that, I like it. Now, part of that is the theming, for sure. I think there's a strong historical theme in here. And I like trying to figure out how to play through this. Now, I mean, if you're a problem, I can go in here and be like, okay, I'm playing the Persians. I need to subjugate other nations, conquer as many of those blue cards, expand my territories. Once I have an empire, start using your battering ram and spreading unrest with your Persian gold. Got it. I'll try that. But you'll learn more tactics than that. This game offers a very deep, fulfilling experience. You just got to get over that initial barrier of learning. I play a lot of games, but this one I kind of had to push through to get to. And I usually find that sort of thing with a heavier Euro game or an 18XX or a heavy war game, not with a deck building game. But once you do get through that, you'll find that there's a lot of options. How you build your deck, which cards you garrison, which cards you pick as you slowly turn into empire, how fast you push to being an empire. You might delay it slightly just to get more of those barbarian cards out. Once the barbarian cards are no longer useful, how do I get rid of them? And so this is a nice, thinky, crunchy process that is going to be at odds with people who are play, buy, shuffle, shuffle, like deck building games often are. This is a deck building game for sure. You're going to go through that pile multiple times. But it's not a quick one. It's a thoughtful delve into these. So I'm recommending this one, but very cautiously. I don't know how often I'm going to play it in the future. I know for sure that if I do play it in the future, I'm kind of saying, do you already know how to play? Because that would be a whole lot easier than teaching someone. Because teaching this is a task. So there's a lot of caveats there, but I want to applaud Osprey Games and the designers here, David Terzi and Mr. Buckle, for trying something new. It feels like a unique push forward. And I'm not faulting the game for being complicated at all. That's just how some games are. I do fault the rule book, but I'm not faulting the game. And there's more into it than that. And once you do so, think about the replayability without mixing them. You could play through this multiple times. Every time has a different civilization, and everyone's going to feel different. You mix it with the Legends box, and that just, now there's so many different cool combinations. So a lot there. Eventually, Mike's going to do a solo version of this, so check that out to see how solo play works. Hint, I heard that he says it's quite good. But hopefully this will help you decide if this is a game for you or not. Until next time, I'm Tom Vasel, and this is Imperium Classics on the Dice Tower. Dice Tower Judgment approved for some.